One of the things that will be material in terms of any changes to our current approach, which is 7 days managed isolation and 3 in self-isolation at home, will be emerging evidence about the incubation period and how early people start to show symptoms. It seems from the early evidence, and as you would expect, that the incubation period is even shorter than Delta, which was shorter than previous variants. That would make sense, in which case we would be probably even more confident we would be picking these cases up during the 7 days they were in managed isolation, and particularly given there's still day 0, 1, day 3 and day 6 testing. Okay, the case is now in the sedema, I can tell you, and I think that was also just 1 or 2 minutes left. Question here.
Given the surge number of cases overall in the UK and the number of Omicron cases in the UK, are you close to designating it a high-risk, very high-risk country?
So we've just today the teams looked at the very high-risk categorisation of countries, and when the Omicron was first discovered, a number of southern African countries were classified as a sort of an initial response as very high risk. Our sense now is that that's not particularly helpful because Omicron is everywhere really, and as you've said, particularly high rates in European countries. The ones that are doing a lot of genome sequencing are finding high numbers, and it's almost certainly at similar rates in other countries. So it's in this sense, we don't think that the very high-risk categorisation is particularly helpful in terms of determining whether countries should or shouldn't have different approaches when people come here. So we'll just probably move to a similar approach to all countries.
Dr. Nathan,
yep,
sorry, what's
please.
your message to contemporaries who are about to go on Christmas break?
Well, my message is the same as it is for all Kiwis, and that is make sure you're vaccinated, mask, scan, pass, and just keep vigilant. The key point, and I just want to emphasise this again, is this person is in managed isolation, as are all the close contacts who were on the flight. So this is not a case that's out in the community. So if you're unwell, of course, get a test. But in the meantime, there's no particular additional risk to Cantabrians at the moment.
Can I just ask what's on the concern that Omicron poses, if and when it comes to New Zealand? I mean, we've seen an extremely high daily case rate in New South Wales today, but there seems to be evidence suggesting it's not as problematic as Delta when, like, in terms of severity. Does it still pose a substantial risk though?
So 2 comments there. First of all, it will be interesting to see just what is driving the big outbreak in New South Wales. There's no doubt where they've found Omicron, there are quite high numbers associated with particular outbreaks, say in hospitality establishments. And we can see this in Europe in a couple of countries where they've done the sequencing as well. So, but it will be interesting to see how much of that New South Wales outbreak is just driven by their existing Delta outbreak and the sort of them taking the handbrake off any of their restrictions and the large gatherings and interactions that were happening, and that could be driving it as much as the Omicron is. The issue around whether the virus is more or less virulent and causes people to get more or less unwell, there are 2 things, of course, that are important there. One is not just the rate of, say, severe illness and hospitalisation, even if that is lower. If it is much more transmissible and the number of cases is much higher, that will still drive more hospital admissions and potentially deaths. And so we will be looking, as I've said, very closely at the emerging evidence on this over the next 1 to 2 weeks. I think we will start to see that appear, and that will give us a good picture then about just what we would want to do if we found Omicron in the community here. 2 more questions.
Just back to lockdown. So if Omicron is found in the community, you're not ruling out recommending more lockdowns?
Well, what I would say is even under the current framework, there is a provision for local restrictions or lockdowns. And so whether it's Omicron or Delta, that's available there as a response if there is an outbreak where we think that might be necessary to help get control and reduce the impact, particularly on health services. So again, it's probably doesn't matter if it's Delta or Omicron, but at this point in time, we're intent on keeping Omicron out of the community.
What can you tell us about the case? Are they a returning resident? Are they here for a sporting team? What do we know about them?
The only, well, in response to those two questions, this is someone who's usually resident in Germany. I'm not sure of whether they're a New Zealand resident or citizen. I don't have that information to hand. They're not here as part of a sporting team. but that's about all I can offer.
What's the latest
Final
you can
question?
tell us about, I guess, how effective the vaccine is against Omicron?
So I think we're seeing some rapidly emerging information here from the initial studies that Pfizer did, which were in the lab, and then some data that's come out of the UK suggesting that 2 doses, and we're talking here about what we're comparing as symptomatic illness. 2 doses of Pfizer seems to be about probably 40% effective at preventing symptomatic illness, but that 3rd booster dose puts that back up between 80 and 90%, and that's what obviously, that's good news, because this is a good vaccine. It's the vaccine we're using. We've started our booster program, and we've got our booster doses arriving over coming months. The question will be just, should we shorten that interval between the 2nd and 3rd dose? And as I say, we're providing advice to ministers who'll be considering this tomorrow.
Could you just confirm that advice would be to 4.5 months, 4.5 months?
We'll look at options there. It would be something less than 6 and more than 0. Okay, thanks very much. Have a good Christmas.
Thanks.